Welcome to the Solid Verbal. And now, Dan and Ty.
Dan Rubenstein, welcome back, my good friend.
Yes.
How you doing today? How was your trip?
Good trip. Got a little bit of rain out on the West Coast, but otherwise really fun. Saw a bunch of people I enjoy and got some outside time. Cannot complain. Always good to get to the West Coast. Ty, how you doing?
I'm good. How is the weather out there compared to Chicago right now?
Chicago's actually kind of nice right now. It's weirdly nice. It's like 50s, almost 60 degrees right now.
Whoa,
so
unseasonably
unseasonably warm.
Tropics, man.
The report I got back from Jody with an eye, who hung back out here, saw somebody with the convertible down. People went to the beach.
Okay.
And that there were at least two dads in either sleeveless shirts or tank tops that were spotted making their way around this area.
Absolutely have to. Yeah, it was like 42 degrees here.
Tropical.
I was out, no coat. Don't need
of course.
a coat. It's been a really cold winter in our respective locations. A break is much needed. But with that being said, enough of the weather. Let's talk college football. Dan is back.
Yes.
I am Ty. Please hit follow. Please hit subscribe if you have yet to do so. Check us out at verballers.com. If you want to support the team, become a certified or premium Verballer. You can sign up to get ad-free episodes, bonus content, be part of our Discord, and so on and so forth. All of your support there goes directly to Dan and I to help us keep the lights on for the podcast. On today's episode, we're going to go through what's been happening in and around the world of college football. There's not a lot of news, but there is some stuff that I think you and I want to cover. And then we've been putting it off for a little bit now, but before we close the book on this here episode and this week, really, going to do some first-year coach grades. Some coaches that took up their mantles last year. We've now had an opportunity to go back through, look at the body of work. You and I are going to score them accordingly. Of course, it's not going to be A through F. You have a little bit of a scale that, of course, is just a little bit of a zag as compared to everybody else's.
It's very scientific. We're going to take a look at these coaches and looking forward based on basically no time. But a full year is basically 1.5 portal cycles because you don't really fully count that first one as they're scrambling on the job, trying to tamper as quickly as they can, securing a high school recruiting class, and then having a full cycle to tamper and recruit and secure both a recruiting class out of high school and a portal class, depending on that team's priorities and abilities, and then what they obviously were able to do on the field, what the hires did or didn't look like, and how they did or didn't work out as assistants, and what it looks like moving forward. So it used to be where like you'd give a lot of guys like year zero, or you can't really look at year one. But then when you look at like who they replaced, it was guys fired after 2 years, 3 years. They're not given a ton of time. So that post year one, it feels more important than ever because you can grow into a success and even throw away the Curt Cignetti factor. He's an outlier to this whole conversation. Throwing that away, you can still improve your team pretty dramatically, pretty quickly in 2026. And so I think we're putting a little bit more weight on year one grades than usual, if that's okay. So we are grading them on a scale between absolutely will not be a problem for their conference, and might end up being a problem for their actual team and program, all the way to they're going to be a big problem for everybody because they are loading up, they look sharp, they're getting players, they're winning big games, they're winning close games, whatever. And so that's the other end of the spectrum. Looks to be a problem for others.
Yeah. 99 problems, but a coach ain't one, or more money, more problems.
Or, hey, look at you.
Look at me. Yeah. Look at me. One with the pop culture here. Welcome back to the Verballerhood. Let's talk through some of that news, shall we?
Let's.
It's not breaking, but we've got another team joining FBS. It feels like they're growing on trees these days. Can't get enough of this damn subdivision. First it was North Dakota State. Now it is Sacramento State, Dan. They are making the move to the MAC, apparently. The MAC of all conferences is taking in a school from Northern California, Dan. Sac State, per a report here that I've got in front of me from our friend Ross Dellinger, will pay an $8 $15 million entry fee into the league and $5 million to the NCAA, which is the FBS entrance fee. This reads a little bit like it's FIFA with all these hidden fees, but I continue. They are accepting 0 conference distribution over that stretch and covering the air travel costs for all visiting MAC football teams, which is an additional $2 to $4 million over 5 years. The total price of the move, including the entry fees and the travel costs, stands to exceed $25 million, Dan Rubenstein.
Damn.
All of this just to get into FBS and be part of the MAC. Quote from Ross, it left so many inside and outside college football athletics asking a question. Why? The quote, it's putting the university on the map.
Right.
That is from Luke Wood, the university president out at Sac State. That is a lot of potatoes. I don't have the sound in front of me. That is a lot of potatoes just to be part of FBS and be part of the MAC, Dan Rubenstein. So we've talked ad nauseum about the dumb money era of college football. By all accounts, this does not appear to be a fiscally responsible decision by Sac State. It definitely reads a lot like they kind of just want to be in the FBS. And they're going to do whatever it takes to get there. And now here they are.
Yeah, I guess the economics are such that this is what is attempting to be a long-term decision, in that if they feel as if they can make money as a MAC team, that they can slowly climb, perhaps put themselves in position to be a Mountain West team or a Pac-12 team or something like that down the line. There's obviously money behind the scenes, inspired money to do, make a move like this in joining the FBS ranks. What is it? You said $23+ million, if my math is correct.
$25
million total cost.
Yeah,
all in 25 for this move this year. We'll see what their recruiting expenses are like. Obviously, there is talent in California. There is talent in Northern California. Sac State, though, is not a North Dakota State situation in that this is not a powerhouse FCS program. They've had some good years. They've had some down years, but this is not like we've proven everything we can at this level. We need a new challenge, and we've grown this program to the point where we think we can compete with bigger schools. It's not that. It is Sac State coming up with the money and hoping to buy in for the good of the future of the program. I hope it works out for them. We'll see. It's a very strange fit in the MAC geographically, but when has that stopped any of these teams in the past few years?
I posted something out on our Twitter feed where I sort of flipped the rectangle in the other direction. Mm-hmm. And as Overballer wrote in, it looks like a big seatbelt across the good old US of A if you are drawing a rectangle around all the member institutions here. So not the Midwest, I think, as we are accustomed to seeing it, but if you draw the rectangle from west to east or east to west, it's sort of a Mid-American conference of some kind.
And so now we have, in addition to the butt matchup between BU, Baylor, and TT, Texas Tech, we now potentially have the ball sack. Is that what you told me? That was your headline before we started. Now, what is that exactly?
We do have a looming ball sack matchup between Ball State and Sacramento State.
Yeah, by the way, they are the Hornets,
yes.
And their mascot is Herky the Hornet. If you look up Herky the Hornet, he is an absolutely yoked, humanized hornet.
I thought you were going to say it looks like Cam Scattaboo, former Sac State player.
It is Scattaboo-ish, but yes, Cam Scattaboo did start his career at Sac State before wrecking shop at ASU. But Herky the Hornet and the Hornets are making their way to the FBS ranks.
I do cringe a little bit when I read the justification for this.
Yeah.
And look, everybody's got their own reasons for this. We, of course, on our show, we will welcome Sacramento State with open arms. Okay.
Sure.
Any sort of new variables, we're all about it.
Mm-hmm.
But they commissioned a consulting firm to do an economic impact study. 5 years in FBS would produce approximately $975 million in the Sacramento area, or roughly $250 million annually. Feels aggressive to me, but I was not part and parcel to the study. Feels like it might be a ChatGPT special, but that's just me speaking. Also, They've got a bunch here about enrollments, how enrollments can go up
That's true.
if you join FBS, which I do understand that there is some real hard and fast proof to that. Certainly that is the case when they bring it up every March during the NCAA tournament. When teams go on a run, tends to put teams on the map. Perhaps Sac State can have a little bit of that same
Wait, hold
benefit
on.
here
When
from
a
joining
team
FBS.
when a team in the NCAA tournament goes on a run, they're on CBS playing against North Carolina or Kansas or something like that.
Listen, I know. I'm just saying.
So we're talking
Just
about enrollment because the energy around Sac State playing against Akron or UMass or Eastern Michigan or Western Michigan or Central Michigan is something that just try and keep the kids away from the Sacramento State campus with the promise of Toledo. That's an ambitious reading of the potential of a move like this.
The thing that gets me, though, is the travel expenses that
Yeah.
they're paying everybody else's travel expenses. And the movie scene that kept coming to mind, I don't know if you've seen Major League 2 as much as I have,
Yeah.
but there is a scene where Roger Dorn is buying the team from Rachel Phelps right in the beginning, and they show the negotiations, and she is just mopping the floor with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he is just agreeing to whatever because he wants the team. Begrudgingly,
Yeah.
but he's agreeing to whatever, and that's what this feels like to me. It just feels like they went with whatever they could to get their hat in the FBS ring. I do hope it works out for them. I am not rooting for Sac State's demise.
Right.
I applaud any grand ambitions here. I really, truly do. Economically speaking, financially speaking, not sure it's there yet. They might have to win a lot more than they've been winning and on a new level to boot in order to hit any of these targets. But
Right. No, I mean, you heard reports
Whatever.
of it with, the Pac-12 melting down and a reconstruction of the Pac-12 and Sac State's interest there. Look, you're going to have to recruit players whose parents will need to buy tickets to go to Ohio and Michigan and Illinois. I guess not Illinois anymore with Northern Illinois switching conferences now to the Mountain West. But it's definitely an experiment. It is definitely taking a chance.
the first West Coast FCS program to move its football team to FBS since Fresno and San Diego State made the move back in 1969.
Jeez.
The president, I guess, points out it's historic, hasn't been done in 57 years. Quote, there were many who fought tooth and nail to make sure this didn't happen.
Right.
We had many people rooting against us despite all the odds. We did something that hasn't been done in 57 years. It's historic. I would love to meet the people rooting against this, but
Again, an extremely okay FCS program.
whatever stories we want to tell here, I'll go with it.
Yeah.
I'll go with it.
All
We
right.
got 138 teams now, which is going to make summer a lot more interesting for you and I trying to study all of these. But
The Hornets have made 4 appearances. This is according to the good people at Wikipedia. 4 appearances in the FCS playoffs with a combined record of 2-4. So
Okay.
the infrastructure
So
as a
that's like
consistently winning team.
that's SEC-esque in the playoffs.
That is true. Recent SEC results, somewhat similar.
Speaking of the SEC, Dan, what's going on with schedules in the SEC? What is
Okay.
this?
So at the I'm risking opening up more wounds on Ari Wasserman's body, on his brain, because
Yeah.
he's taken a lot of hits here. But he wrote about this subject recently.
I was going to say he's not the one who
He's in
canceled the
charge.
games.
He's in charge.
He's just reacting, right?
So Texas canceled games against ASU in the early 2030s, which are made-up years as far as I'm concerned, Ty. I'm just trying to
Right.
get through this week.
No, we might not make it there. But
Yeah.
continue.
And this is sort of in the shadow of a story of, I think Paul Feinbaum talked about not expecting Alabama to go through with its scheduled home-and-home with Ohio State starting next season, so the 2027 season.
Okay.
And, Michigan has a game against Texas as well coming up here. And, Ohio State returns the favor with Texas this season. And certainly you look around the SEC and there's some headline matchups. I think Texas has Notre Dame in the future. Georgia has Clemson once again. I believe Georgia also has Ohio State coming up. And this is all in an even bigger shadow of the SEC going to 9 conference games, under an even bigger shadow of the SEC perhaps being upset that schools like Texas this past season didn't make the playoff, with some looking at their loss to Ohio State and getting themselves a third loss as to why they didn't get in, which is not an unreasonable argument, but it also misses some other context with Texas's 2025 season.
Right.
So that Alabama does not want to risk having that crucial third loss come against a team like Ohio State, and jeopardizing its ability to get into a 12-team playoff as the SEC moves to 9 conference games.
Right.
To me, it's all just sort of sad, right? It's sad that we as college football fans don't get a headline matchup like this come September. And these are schools, obviously, in Ohio State and Alabama that thrive in no small part because they do play big games, both in the postseason, regular season, and they have been teams unafraid to play big non-conference games in September, which adds to, the surge of interest in the sport that season, because you do get those headline matchups in the first, second, third week, whatever. And it's good for the sport. It's good for those places in terms of solidifying their spots as like Alabama's on network TV all the time, playing big games. That helps Alabama's visibility, obviously. Not that Alabama needs help in terms of, the branding of the program, but to stay on top, it helps to win as many big games as you can. Ohio State has benefited from playing as many big games as they can, and they've been unafraid as well. And a lot of these SEC teams, right? Georgia's played these in recent years. Alabama's been unafraid. LSU has been unafraid. And so, much to their credit, it's disappointing that these schools are looking at the calculus of the college football playoff and saying, well, we obviously play in a gauntlet of an SEC schedule. And now that we go to a 9-game schedule, it's now a mega gauntlet. And so their calculus is, if the out-of-conference schedule isn't weighted as appropriately as we think it should be weighted, then why even play those games? Because if Texas had scheduled, a far lesser team than Ohio State, then they'd be in the playoff, as if that's some kind of mountaintop to stand upon. Yes, we can lose to Florida. Of course we can weather a loss to Florida and still play in the college football playoff. It's kind of sad that puts fans in that position, and that it puts, people who just like strong matchups in September in that position. Obviously, you get it from these teams' perspective. Obviously, this is why, I guess the Big Ten was championing an auto bid situation so that you don't have a committee trying to weigh these things. And there are also counterpoints, obviously, that teams like Miami with their win over Notre Dame or Oklahoma with their win over Michigan was looked at favorably for having that kind of out-of-conference win when measured up against other teams considered for their spots in the college football playoff. So,
okay,
it's all just kind of sad to me.
So let me ask you this, because I talked on the last episode about, I think, a similar topic with our friend John Kurtz from Open for Business. But the comparison that we discussed was Texas Tech and its schedule in, say, 2026 versus BYU.
Right.
Two very, very different scheduling models. Texas Tech effectively plays nobody. Nobody in the offseason, even their non-conference slate works out pretty well for them. But it's very clear in their non-con slate that it's like Abilene Christian. Okay, right. It's nobody. On the BYU side, they obviously add Notre Dame. The schedule as a whole is, I think, a lot more difficult. Those are two very, very different ways to go about your schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Which is better? Texas Tech, less resistance. BYU, much to your point about Michigan, or I guess Oklahoma, Miami, there's a little bit more meat on the bone there.
Right.
I am curious to see how this works out in the long run for these schools. And I would say especially so on the SEC side if they keep falling short of the national championship.
Right.
Because one of the other things I talked about with John is this whole idea of credit scores for conferences. Where is the SEC's credit score at right now? Like, we know the external factors are still pumping up the conference. I still happen to believe it's a very deep conference with many good teams.
Yeah, and a lot of people care to watch. Yeah.
A lot of people care to watch. I mean, the same is true to an extent with the Big Ten.
For sure.
But to what end are they penalized, or should they be penalized, if the performance in the postseason isn't quite up to snuff? Isn't where it used to be under, say, like the Saban dynasty eras, or even more recently what we saw out of Georgia with Kirby Smart.
Right.
Very good teams.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Very deep conference. But at some point, does the SEC, if trends continue, does it need some of that validation of playing schools from other power conferences, bigger schools, in order to continue, I guess, that mantra of the SEC truly being a gauntlet where it just means more and it's tougher than everybody else?
I think it's all just a margin for error conversation. That there has been conversation, I think rightfully so, about perhaps like Indiana's schedule, both within the Big Ten, not in 2025 and 2024, and their non-conference schedule moving forward. And so Indiana obviously did not schedule those future schedules with the like, oh, it's a gilded path to a top 4 seed. No, Indiana's been trying to make a bowl game. That's what Indiana's schedule has been. Scheduling MAC teams, scheduling an FCS game against like Indiana State. Last year it was ODU, right? That they're scheduling things to say like, if we're pretty decent, we can get to 6 or 7 wins, and it'd be pretty cool to play a 13th game. And now Indiana finds themselves in a position where they didn't think they'd be. So now the conversation around Indiana is, well, they better beat everybody by a bunch, because if they look sort of sloppy against this schedule, they shouldn't get credit. And so if you're talking about that in the context of Texas Tech, they blew everybody out last year, not playing, I don't believe, a headline non-conference game outside of the Big 12. Right. So they blew everybody out. They took care of business, and they got to the playoff as a top 5 seed or whatever, and they nearly scored a point in the playoff. Again, though, beside the point, because they did what it took, and they didn't leave any doubt as a team that was worthwhile as a top 12 team. So now if you're talking about that within the context of the SEC, part of the SEC's pitch to America is that we're the best, we're the deepest. Look at our results in the postseason. Look at our results in the non-conference portion of the season. Look at all these headliners. Look at all these NFL draft picks. If they all come together and all of the SEC weenies circle the wagon and say, we're not going to play anybody.
Settle.
We're not going to play anybody in September. And we have this mega gauntlet of a schedule that, trust us, it's a mega gauntlet, because we don't have to prove it in September against good teams outside of the conference. You just have to trust us. And then their margin for error is reduced, because then they have to play against the best teams in the country in December and January in the college football playoff or in big bowl games. And then they once again don't play well. Then you can say, well, the SEC is just protecting itself against reality by not scheduling Ohio State or Michigan, or take your pick of, top 15 type teams, because they'd much rather tell you they're good than prove to you they're good, because their goal is to just end up in the postseason rather than, prove it on the field to end up in the postseason by beating teams out. So I'm not saying it's a bad strategy.
No,
I'm just saying
I do get it.
It runs counter to what SEC people have puffed their chests out about. Yeah. So that to me is the sad thing, because I think I'm not an SEC team fan. You're not an SEC team fan. We've enjoyed these games. We've enjoyed games like, LSU and Oregon and Alabama and Wisconsin, and Georgia played Oregon. There's been a lot of these types of games, whether they're neutral site or home and home. It'd be sad to lose it. It'd be a little bit weird to lose it, considering all of these teams, not just SEC teams, have decided, oh, we're TV sellouts now. We're going to do everything we can to make TV happy with us. And then they're going to start canceling these TV games, whether they're home and home or whether they're neutral site games. It runs sort of counter to it, but I guess the biggest programs are able to dictate in a way that some other programs aren't. So once again, it's all sort of sad to me. I don't think we should look at Alabama as weak and scared. I just think we're looking at the SEC as like what is the best thing for our bottom line and what is the best thing for our positioning. And if we don't have as many teams as we believe have earned the right to be in the postseason, then we look at this as a failure. So it's much more about, the goal of participation rather than winning. And so I guess they're looking for the ultimate participation trophy, getting into the college football playoff. They want to participate above all else, Ty, right?
I mean, I get it. You have to you understand the logic behind it.
Sure.
As a fan, I'm not going to act like I'm crazy about it.
Yeah, but then guess what happens in September? Lane Kiffin or Nick Saban or whoever starts complaining that people aren't showing up for their games and that the students aren't showing up for the games because they're scheduling way, way down often. So what's it going to be? I don't know. That's the question to me. What's the priority here? And so you'll have SEC fans complaining about schools like Indiana. You'll have people like Ohio State fans saying Alabama's running scared. And I don't know. I once again think the losers here are people who just enjoy college football.
Just want to watch a game in like week 2.
Yep.
When it's sunny out and you can watch the game on an iPad at a picnic table or, those are the fans are the losers. The fans want to see these high profile matchups early. I think it's a big part of why college football is special that early part of the season in September when you have some of these really high profile matches. This isn't to say they're all going away, but I don't, as a fan, speaking only as a fan, not from the perspective of the SEC or the Big Ten or Notre Dame or anybody.
But they don't care.
Just as a fan, I want to see more of these games. And it doesn't do a whole lot to dispel the narrative that the postseason isn't hurting the regular season.
Correct.
This is one of the ways where I think we've been waiting to see what's the impact going to be.
Right. How
will teams react? Will there be, an immediate and swift reaction to try and make it easier to get into the play? Well, this kind of supports that line of thinking.
Yeah. And look, I'm okay with anybody getting creative with scheduling. If you want all of the power conference teams to play 8 conference games, but have mandatory 2 Power 4 teams decided in a lottery system or in a tiered system where okay, you've been to a bowl game or the playoff and however many times, you can only draw from these 30 teams in the lottery. Let's get creative with it. Fine. But the idea of pulling out of these matchups, scheduling these cool matchups, you're also hurting fans like an Alabama fan who was like, I cannot wait to go to Columbus. That's a bucket list, go to the shoe and see a huge game like that, and vice versa. You're hurting those fans. It's just, it's sort of sad that, you and your ilk, Ty, your expansionist ilk, another victim to the expansionist virus of college football.
Well, let's put it this way. If you want to get creative with scheduling, maybe even with the money.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you that the First National Bank of Sacramento State is willing to hear your proposal.
It's true.
They are willing to hear your proposal.
Yeah.
Why don't we leave it there? Write in solidverbal@gmail.com. I don't know why I'm yelling.
No, that's okay. You're worked up.
It's good to be back with you. Let's talk some first-year coach grades, shall we?
Let's.
It's a shame that we have to do this. It's really despicable.
So, full
Thanks,
disclosure, as we were going through some technical problems here, before we hit go, I was paging through my little iPad with all the sounds on it, and I found, I don't know when this was. This is when Jimbo Fisher was still coaching at Texas A&M, when he had some sort of beef maybe with Nick Saban, I want to say. And we pulled all the sounds, and I still have one on one of my panes here of the board. And it's a shame we got to do this, but we got to do this. We had a handful of first-year coaches in 2025. Not as many as we're going to have in 2026, mind you, because it was a very active cycle. But 2025, bit of a down cycle. You and I have taken some time now to go through, look at the receipts, and put together some grades on the coaches that had an opportunity to jump to new teams in 2025. Those being North Carolina, Wake Forest, West Virginia, Purdue. We include Stanford in here because we have to. And UCF. What is that? 6 teams?
Yeah.
6 teams. And we could talk about more if you want. Those
I
weren't
definitely
the only,
have thoughts on more. Yeah.
Yeah, those weren't the only teams in FBS that had new coaches, and we have some scattered thoughts on all of them.
Yeah.
But again, remind the fine folks what our grading scale is going to look like here for this thought experiment.
After year 1, can we conclude that this coach is going to be a problem? This program is going to be a problem under this coach for other teams in the conference, out of the conference, whatever. That, like, as an example, will Scott Frost-led UCF be a problem for the Big 12 moving forward? And
Okay,
by
so
problem, I mean, at the very least, like an annoying bowl team.
Okay, so a problem for others or a problem for themselves?
Correct. Exactly right. Will Scott Frost be a problem for UCF fans watching their team, wanting their team to succeed? Or will UCF under Scott Frost be a problem for the Big 12? Meaning, at the very least, UCF is going to be a perennially annoying bowl plus team.
Well, since you mentioned UCF, Dan, UCF was 5-7 last year, 2-7 in conference. Their wins came against Jacksonville State, North Carolina A&T. They knocked off North Carolina, who we will talk about here shortly.
Yep.
West Virginia, who we will also talk about here rather shortly. And Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
Won that one 17-14, second to last game of the season. I put in some time trying to get a feel for where the fan sentiment is at.
Mm-hmm.
And as best I can tell, I am picking up distinct notes of cautious optimism here with UCF.
Okay.
Because a lot of people expected a rebuild year last season. They largely got one. The win over North Carolina, the blowout over West Virginia, those to me represented the highlight moments that fans of UCF would probably point to. The other thing that I would add is that there was a real cultural shift going from Gus Malzahn to now Scott Frost. So there are definitely changes afoot that I think fans can see and feel and touch and hear about if they listen to podcasts like this one.
Right.
But going 5-7, missing a bowl game, that has to be somewhat disappointing for a fan base that remembers a 13-0 season not all that long ago. So for my money, as somebody who was a little bit higher than I expected to be on UCF when we did our previews last year, this to me feels like there was some meat on the bone, but by and large, it wasn't too big a swing in either direction. This is like kind of the best case scenario, in my opinion. The bigger concern now moving forward is what did Scott Frost learn from that Nebraska experience, and are we going to see more of that now at UCF? Because the first trip to UCF was great, right? The undisputed national champions, 13-0. But Scott Frost has had a bit of a journey since then, and the failures at Nebraska are, I think, a pretty big blinking red light.
Right.
Will he repeat any of those failures? Most fans, again, as best I can tell, and I think they're right in this, they're giving him benefit of the doubt. Given year one and the context around it, it was just a huge overhaul. But now in year two, they got to show some clear improvement on offense. They got to get to 6 wins. I think that's where I would be if I were a fan, and that's mostly what I am picking up as I read the room here a little bit with UCF.
I'm going to say UCF under Scott Frost is closer to being a problem for others than a problem for themselves. And the reason for that is if year one was, and they do lose a lot of key players to the portal, and that's to be expected after year one of a coach. Players give a coach time, and they decide, you know what, I think it's not for me anymore. I'm going to go elsewhere. Bringing in Alonzo Barnett is a positive thing to me, playoff quarterback.
Oh, I love that.
And I think the main reason is I don't think the bar to clear in the Big 12 to be a 7-5 type team that can do at least a thing really well, play defense really well, rush the passer really well, generate explosive plays on offense really well. I don't think it's a crazy bar to clear, especially Kansas State is starting over. Iowa State is starting over. We don't know how sustainable what's going to happen in Tucson is going to be with Brent Brennan, one disastrous year, one really impressive year. We don't know where this goes from here. ASU, new starting quarterback, new stuff at ASU. We'll see. I mean, I think a lot of us are pretty bullish on ASU. I always have to remember which one it is. Bullish on ASU moving forward. And I don't think anybody really thinks that UCF can do enough to build up this roster to compete with perhaps the top of this conference. But I think the bar to clear, if the defensive progress continues, it's under Alex Grinch. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
Yep.
I think the roster building should be good enough to the point where they can sustainably go to bowls and do something really, really well, which qualifies them as bowl plus annoying.
I completely agree.
Okay.
I completely agree. As I look at this roster, I think they'll be much improved at quarterback, at running back, wide receiver,
Same.
offensive line. It looks to me like there is at least something of a strategy here. And if you take Scott Frost at his word, he didn't want to leave the first time.
Sure.
It was a mistake to leave. He likes it here.
But it also doesn't mean that it's pick up where he left off.
No,
Different conference, different roster. Although
There's a
Mackenzie
lot
Milton is
it's-
involved. Yeah.
It's apples and oranges. It's not the same. But back to your point about Alonzo Barnett. So Alonzo Barnett transfers in from JMU, had a good year with JMU, and he figures to be sort of the centerpiece now of the offense that they're building in 26. All four quarterbacks who played in more than one game in 2025 transferred out for UCF. So this is kind of a clean slate. It's Alonzo Barnett. It's Kewan Jenkins, who comes over from FIU. He figures to be the backup now. But the other thing that I think I take some stock in is the fact that if you look at what he did in the portal, it looks like they're deliberately targeting older, more experienced players who have more proven production, maybe a little bit lower on the NIL spectrum, rather than going after some of the star power. We have seen this work, by the way. I'm not going to even use Indiana as the example, but I'll hold up Houston as sort of an example of this.
Sure.
I talked about the Willie Fritz strategy in NIL last year, and this is not that. It just feels a lot like they're going after guys that they know what they're going to get out of them. They're not taking a huge risk. They're not rolling the dice here. They're going after guys that they think will give them production. I tend to agree. There is a lot, just in looking at the schedule right now, there's a lot of like big old shrugs on the schedule. It doesn't look easy to me in terms of a Big 12 schedule, but it also doesn't look like it is going to have a ridiculous gauntlet that they need to worry about. So I tend to agree with you. I think if what I am seeing right now is accurate, and if the feeling that the guttural feeling that I get in the pit of my stomach is accurate.
But that's also looking forward, right? That's also looking forward. If you're to look backwards, the other way to read this is they beat 3 bad teams in terms of their FBS wins, and they were only competitive, truly competitive, against one of the decent teams that they played, and I believe it was in Houston. So that's year one. That's dealing with a lot of turnover everywhere, and it's always going to be a little bit chaotic. But I don't know. If you weigh the roster moves and you weigh the sort of squint and you can see a little bit of success in 2025, I would say it's likelier that they're a problem for others than themselves.
You. Yeah, I'm in agreement there. Let's go to North Carolina and Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
4-8 in year one. They didn't win a game. What were they? 2-6 or something in conference, whatever it was.
Yep.
How do we think fans feel about this?
I think fans are still holding out hope, North Carolina fans. They took a step back from where they were after firing Mac Brown. The team got worse on offense and defense than they were in 2024 under Mac Brown. And obviously there was going to be a time to adjust to Bill Belichick and his coaches and the players that he brought in and the GM and front office people that he brought in as, once again, this is the 33rd NFL team. That was the
33rd.
positioning?
Yep, 33rd NFL team.
They, at their ceiling, could have gone 7-5, right? If they won a couple of those close games, it was against Virginia and Cal, I want to say.
Yep.
So at their ceiling, they're getting to 7-5 if some of those close losses, had been close wins. And that happened in October. And Duke, by the way. That gets them to 7-5. Those 3 wins.
Yeah, I have
losses.
a couple games highlighted here.
Yes.
It's the Cal game, the Virginia game, and the Duke game were all one-score affairs. Everything goes in their favor. That's 7 wins. If just 2 of them go in their favor, they're playing in a bowl game. So they weren't super far off just in terms of results. I think if we are looking at numbers behind the scenes, not necessarily that top line score, but some of the stuff underneath is a little bit more concerning. But at least the results weren't so far afield that they weren't, competitive in the second half of the season.
The concerning thing is, the singular concerning thing from the season was the offense, that, there were stories about the guys they did bring in and, coaches being surprised that they weren't in on bigger names, considering they had the biggest head coaching name in the carousel in Bill Belichick, that they weren't able to sway anybody really on offense. That was a huge, huge name from the portal, but, it's limited time. They immediately make a move. Bill Belichick fires his offensive coordinator, Freddie Kitchens, which I look as a positive thing, that they recognize.
That was the right move.
Recognize that the offense was not heading in an acceptable enough direction, and they needed to go to, my notes say, Bobby Petrino. Bobby Petrino is what's in my notes here.
Petrino is accurate, yes.
And he is a very skilled offensive mind. If nothing else, skilled offensive mind. Billy Edwards is the quarterback to lead the way, it seems, moving forward. The thing that also distresses me about feeling good about North Carolina as a problem for the ACC is they followed up an underwhelming portal season with kind of an underwhelming portal season. This wasn't we realized our shortcomings in terms of identifying and going after talent and convincing people to open up their wallets to, help support the portaling efforts. There's not a lot there. It's a lot of guys who couldn't really crack rotations at big places. It's a lot of perhaps counting on players from smaller places that haven't played against bigger competition, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, but it's a risk all the same. That they weren't in on guys like places that have decided that they need to be all in financially in the portal. They were not in those conversations. And so you still wonder, what can North Carolina do with this roster? As good as Bill Belichick has been as a coach in his career, you're asking him to do something with this roster and winning, what would be an acceptable improvement this year, 8-9 games or whatever. It just doesn't seem like the roster's there, that the efforts are there, and you're paying him like a playoff coach.
$10 million a year? Yeah.
I'm going to say he is appearing to be more of a problem. I'm not getting into the Jordan Hudson stuff or anything. He is looking like more of a problem for North Carolina right now than vice versa.
The quarterback room to me is fascinating. It is fascinating. I don't know if either of us is all that sold on Billy Edwards Jr.
No.
Billy
got
Edwards
hurt early.
Was,
yeah,
got hurt, was never really a factor for Wisconsin, comes over now, at least gives them some veteran leadership. I'm curious to see if for some reason he is not the guy, or if he gets hurt again. Curious to see what Teron Dickens looks like, the transfer that they bring over from Western Carolina, who is smaller, is 5'11", 180, but threw for 3,500 yards and 38 touchdowns a year ago. Also ran for close to 400 yards. So that's a guy that they bring over. They also got Travis Burgess, who's the 4-star recruit, who's 6'5", a shade over 200 pounds, a tall glass of water. So they got some options there. I don't know if I feel great about any of them, but I think there's reason for intrigue. The thing that I kept coming back to, though, when I think about North Carolina, when I look back on Carolina, I am still hung up on the contrast that we saw between the very first drive of the season and the rest of the season.
Sure.
You remember that?
Of course. Well, nobody knew what to expect, so yeah.
I mean, one drive in, you got Skip Bayless talking about Bill Belichick being the greatest coach in the history of all coaches, and then 48-14, was that the final in week one? That was the most watched game in week one. You know that?
I believe it.
The TCU North Carolina game, for obvious reasons. So,
sure.
It was a very tumultuous go if you are a North Carolina fan. You start off with the first drive of the season. At some point midway through the year, I remember doing a radio interview, and I talked about this on the show, where it looked for a hot minute. There's like a 72-hour stretch where it looked like they were going to fire Bill Belichick midseason.
Right. There were weird stories being floated.
Weird stuff going on. News of the weird. So, yeah, year one was always going to be tumultuous. I don't know if we could have predicted just how tumultuous, but they had 70 new players, which is a lot. And a coach who had never coached in college before and had been off for a little bit and was looking to jump back in. So I think the recruiting class that they had, which was 19th, I want to say, in terms of high school recruiting.
Yeah.
I think you combine that with the portal, they're going to have 60 new players this year. I think that buys him at least a little bit more goodwill.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's under contract.
He's under contract. They're not going to fire him, at least not now. And I think year one was, the expectation was always that it was going to be sort of like what we saw. Nobody really knew what to expect. But now this is when the real evaluation starts in year two. I think I am with you. I'm still not sold on the quarterback position, and I'm not fully sure I understand where the rest of the project is going. So if I am putting it on a spectrum, I am definitely closer to them being, or him being, more of a problem, especially if you take in all the extracurriculars. Him being more of a problem for North Carolina than North Carolina being a problem for everybody else.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, 19th overall, which they had 40 commitments, so that like skews the rankings a little bit. But I'm not going to count on true freshmen and Bill Belichick, of all people, playing 17, 18-year-olds as difference makers in year two unless he's left with no choice.
All right, let's stay in the great state of North Carolina, if you'd like, and let's talk about Wake Forest.
Oh man, problem for others, and that's that's where Wake wants to exist. Continue.
I don't know how you can be a Wake Forest fan and be anything other than ecstatic after year one under Jake Dickert. It looks like their quarterback this year is going to be Gio Lopez, who comes over from North Carolina.
Yes.
What's going on here, man?
ACC experience. Maybe it's just a better situation. Look, they lost to round out Wake Forest's reality is, yes, they had a really good year with basically no quarterback play, all things considered. It was an embarrassing loss to Florida State, but the way that they were competitive against this schedule in the ACC, that it was year one, that it was a later in the process hire in Jake Dickert, that I believe, maybe I'm wrong on that, that there is something about Wake Forest and optimism. Now, Wake Forest is never going to recruit on a high level. Jake Dickert is not a huge name in the ACC and recruiting circles. It doesn't seem like they're going to have the money to compete with some of the bigger programs in the ACC for transfers and recruiting and stuff. They lose both their best offensive and defensive linemen to the portal this year. But in terms of a pure coaching job,
no.
And how close Wake was to even more, right? They were like a minute and a half from being 9-3 or something. That I think Wake Forest can solidly exist as a bowl team who can be a wrench for a lot of people moving forward.
I mean,
last year it was the defense that led the way.
Right.
That's
last year was Jake Dickert's first year. He is bringing back his offensive and defensive coordinators. So there's some continuity there. I believe in the recruiting game, and you're right to bring up, it may never be a situation where they're going to go out there and have a top 20 class, but they had a top 50 class. I think they were 38th nationally, which is one of, if not the best that they've had in forever. So he's already had something of an impact on that side of things. And I think if we are to glean anything from what we saw in 2025, it doesn't necessarily need to be the highest ranked recruiting, either in high school or portal class.
Right. No, it's not. Never going to be.
That's sort of not what Jake Dickert did up at Wazoo.
No.
And that's not what he did in year one at Wake Forest. He took Robbie Ashford to 9 wins.
Yep.
So, I just come back to what I said. I don't think you can be a Wake Forest fan and be anything other than completely ecstatic from what you saw in year one. I've got a bunch of games highlighted here. I could talk about all of these games. I won't do that. I am pretty excited about what Jake Dickert looks like in year two. with Wake Forest, and especially given where the ACC is at right now. Especially where the ACC is at, where it just kind of feels like it's a Wild West right now, outside of Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? There is definitely space for somebody else to jump up and be, as you said, a problem. So I'm with you. I got to believe that enthusiasm has not been this high in Winston-Salem since, what was it, 2021 when they won 11 games?
Sure.
Whatever it's been.
The Wolford wagon?
The Wolford wagon, man. Like, he's
yes.
built a culture real quick. He's got a player-first approach. There's a lot of optimism here, and I think for good reason.
Yes, I agree with you, although I wouldn't go as far as saying there is a vacuum at or near the top, and why not Wake? I think I can pump the brakes a little bit on that specific conversation, but as a perennial bowl team...
I'm not even saying at the top, Dan. I'm just saying the conference as a whole.
Oh, I know.
There's a pretty big space right in the meaty middle of this conference, the upper to middle tier of this conference, that is going to be occupied by somebody. This year, maybe it was Virginia. Kind of, I guess more than that, Virginia, being so they played for the conference championship. But it's just there's wiggle room there if you're Wake, and I think you got to ask, why not us?
Yeah, the Narduzzi zone is what you're saying. The Narduzzi zone could rent to a new renter. Okay.
West Virginia.
West Virginia, I am closer to thinking Rich Rod is a problem for West Virginia than vice versa. I don't like the constant turnover involved. I mean, I like that they're looking at the roster and they say we need a lot. Given what Rich Rod has done with quarterbacks, no disrespect to what they brought in this year in what's his name from Oklahoma, Michael Hawkins.
Michael Hawkins, yeah.
You're telling me like a Scotty Fox, Michael Hawkins battle to determine the future power of West Virginia football is something to get excited. Like, I like their defensive coordinator. I like some of the pieces on their defense and what they did last year. But from what they did last year, and it's always good to be Pitt. It is always good to be Pitt if you're a West Virginia human. I'm squinting too often when looking at the different facets of this West Virginia program to feel great. I like what they did. Once again, this recruiting season, they signed a ton of guys, right? They flipped guys late. They were aggressive.
We will talk about that in a second. Yeah.
Both high school and portal adds up to 173 new players, something like that.
It's 83. 83. That is the most in all of FBS. By the way, I should also point out, if we're going to mention where they are at on that spectrum.
But how many was it last year, by the way?
It was like 70.
Yeah, right. So we're just
something like that.
Sorry, continue.
The next two highest schools in terms of number of new players, tied at 74, are Iowa State and Oklahoma State. Yeah. So this isn't a show about Iowa State and Oklahoma State. We will talk about them in due course here. But if you take anything away from this, just be mindful of the fact that we've got 3 teams in the Big 12, and there are actually others too that are, within the top 15 of this list. Mm-hmm. There will be a lot of turnover in the Big 12, and I think that's part of what makes the Big 12 exciting, because you have a lot of variability and there are a bunch of possibilities that I think could unfold in 2026. But West Virginia is definitely leading the pack with 83 new commits.
Yeah, and by the way, Oklahoma State and Iowa State, those are brand new hires. Rich Rod is now entering his second season, so it's a little bit different. And so you can read it two ways. You can read it that, like, look, Rich Rod recognizes what needed to change, and he and his staff have eyes on upgrading everywhere, and that's the hope, bringing in so many new players, and perhaps true freshmen are going to play and get into the rotation, and we're going to see those stories about, like, West Virginia starters are younger than everybody else in the Big 12 or whatever. They have the youngest, and that's always kind of like a problem. If you're the youngest team, that's a problem. That means things have gone wrong with your development and your ability to evaluate. Unless you're sending, 13 players to the NFL every season, which West Virginia very much is not. So the one read is they're aggressive. They're finding guys that have higher ceilings and have experience and are going to solidify things. And the downside is there's zero stability to this program. There's zero guys who can say, this is what we did last year. This is what worked for us. This is what didn't work for us. This is how we're going to bring you along. Well, not bring you along, but the players who are like, they understand the language, they understand the rhythms of the program, and now they're going to work a rotation into it, whatever. You can look at this and saying there's zero stability to West Virginia football, bringing in however many new players over 2 years, and that it's hardly the way to build long-term success. Because again, Indiana is an outlier. If you're looking at this program and saying, bringing in 130 new players in 2 years or whatever the number is, it's pointing to a lot of screw-ups in your evaluation and your development. And so right now, I don't see a way for West Virginia to scratch and claw its way to 8 wins every year.
No.
It just seems like too steep an incline.
Well, I mean, look, last year was always going to be a transition year.
Yeah.
I think everybody knew that going in. Beating Pitt in overtime in week 3 bought a lot of goodwill for Rich Rod. It did sort of taper from there, both in terms of the goodwill and in terms of things like attendance at the stadium.
Yep.
And most importantly, I should add health.
Yep.
Health is sort of the X factor because they were super beat up last year. It killed them to lose Jaheim White in week 2, in addition to Jaden Bray, the wide receiver. Those guys were both done for the year in week 2. They also lost Ty Edwards, who's another running back, as well as Nico Marchiol, their quarterback, right? So they lost a lot last year.
Marchiol, yeah.
What is it, Marchiol?
I'm almost positive, yes.
Sure. So the question is, how did he do? And the answer from my standpoint is, I don't know. In a vacuum, I do not know. If I told West Virginia fans, without any other context, hey, you're going to finish 4-8, you're also going to have 3 one-score games on top of it that maybe if things go, a little bit more in your favor, you get a win or 2 out of those. I think people will be okay with that. I do. The part I'm having trouble digesting is the portal thing that you mentioned.
Yeah.
50 guys transferring out, 34 new guys coming in. That's a year after there were 53 new guys transferring in. High school recruiting is decent, but it's just a lot of turnover. Again, 83 new commits in total, which is, as I said, the most in FBS.
Yeah.
That's just a lot. It doesn't feel like you're building, right? It feels like you're trying to play roulette year in and year out. 2 years running now.
Yep.
So he needs to obviously improve on 4-8. And I would like to see a little bit more from the standpoint of longer-term stability. That's my cause for pause.
Okay. So what's your answer?
My answer is I agree with you again.
Okay.
I think still trending more closer to being a problem for West Virginia than for everybody else.
Only making $3.5 million, which is crazy to say, just as a human, but the return on investment isn't as severe as the Bill Belichick situation. So he'll have time. Obviously, a beloved figure in Morgantown, but as of now, I don't know. I feel like they're searching a little bit too much.
I do feel like Michael Hawkins fits what he likes to do on offense, though.
Okay.
I think personnel-wise, that's a good fit. I think he could do really well in a Rich Rod system.
Okay.
But, you're kind of throwing a dart at a board, trying to figure out how the remaining pieces are going to work. I don't know.
Better get those wins early, by the way, West Virginia this season. It's a backloaded schedule.
We got Purdue and Stanford left. Let's do Purdue.
Okay.
Purdue went 2-10, 0-9 in conference. We've got a bunch of Purdue fans on our Discord, in our Patreon community, who write into us frequently.
Mm-hmm.
The fan sentiment that I have detected is one of resignation, but cautiously being hopeful.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think from what I could gather, people appreciate the fact that Barry Odom, has rebuilt programs before. So there's still some hopefulness with regard to that.
Okay.
There were definite moments this season where Purdue maybe wasn't within a score, but felt like they were playing whistle to whistle, which means something, at least to me. And I think Barry Odom also bought himself some goodwill, my word of the day here,
Yeah.
by acknowledging the fans that stuck around despite the fact that the team went 2-10. Fans appreciate that. And so I think, like I said, that buys you goodwill. That gets at least a little bit of buy-in to this being a process. But it does not paper over the fact that they're in a huge hole right now.
Right.
And it is made worse by the fact that Notre Dame is on top of the world. It is made worse by the fact that Indiana is now even more on top of the world in state. So if you're a fan really of any team, looking around, kind of looking at your hands, shrugging, wondering, why can't that be us? Why can't we do that?
Right.
If them, why not us?
Especially when they were that team. They were a problem for others under Jeff Brom.
The spoiler makers.
Right. Not that they were a 10-win threat, but they did end up because of weird Big Ten math in a Big Ten championship game, right? I believe.
Correct.
That's correct.
Correct.
They did win some big games under Jeff Brom against big teams. And look, the Ryan Walter era was terrible. And the recent now first year of Barry Odom is finishing the season 0-10, being competitive in exactly one Big Ten game late. Yep. They were competitive in the third quarter against USC, sort of. The thing that has me questioning Purdue is if they're not going to be crazy aggressive in the portal financially, which it's tough, right? It's a tough sell on a team, again, that finished 0-10, that didn't have any wins over an FBS team, I believe.
Right.
I forget. They beat Ball State, excuse me.
Beat Ball State. They beat
to start the season, but also beat Southern Illinois. Them saying, or Barry Odom specifically saying, Ryan Brown is our guy.
Right.
After Ryan Brown was arguably the worst quarterback in the Big Ten last season, is an indication to me that it's mostly an indication to me that people were not willing to spend portal-wise for Purdue to find a better option. Two, obviously it's going to be very tough to convince a clearly better option at quarterback to come to Purdue unless there's a very solid offensive line and receiving core and offensive coordinator in place. So it is baby steps. But you look at this roster and you look at the situation from last year and you're like, what is the path? What are you looking for to end up 4-8 in 2026 when they've lost the best players to the portal and they're adding what appears to be just guys? So Purdue might just be a place right now that is unwilling to compete from a financial perspective. But I don't know. I think it might just be a place right now that is, not built at all as a, infrastructure wise to be a bowl team. And so for that reason, Ty, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm looking at their line here. I mean, it's going to mostly be transfers. I mean, a lot of this team is still going to be transfers, guys that they're bringing in from elsewhere. The Ryan Brown thing, though, is interesting at quarterback. 9 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Everything that I've read has been that they actually like where their quarterback room is at.
Yeah, I saw that too. That gives me cause for pause.
That's what they're going to say. They're not going to say we don't like our guys. It is a very, very steep hole for these guys to climb out. And Barry Odom having a track record for turning programs around is comforting in one sense. But also, look, the conference is bigger now. You do have teams like Indiana that have made that top tier very quickly and made everybody else envious. I am not seeing it here based on this roster. I am not seeing the winter wonders that you need. Even one or two.
Dude, you need September wonders.
Exactly.
September sensations.
I'm just not really seeing it. That doesn't mean that they can't take a jump forward. I think they will be better. But I still trend on the side of being more a problem for Purdue than everybody else in the Big Ten, just because of the starting point. It's going to be tough to get where this team wants to go. And again, I'm just not seeing the personnel here.
By the way, when you look at their schedule,
you don't have the trigger man that you can rely on. That's
right.
A little bit disconcerting.
Their 2025 schedule, for as bad as things went for them, featured basically nothing but top 40 defenses. They didn't have those baked-in wins that you have elsewhere. Not because the teams that they were playing wall-to-wall were all excellent, but they all had at least competent to very good defenses. 36, 13, 41, 34, 28, 15, 1, 9, and 2 were the defensive SP plus ratings. Now, obviously, they're playing some kind of wonky offenses, and perhaps that's inflating those numbers a little bit, even though this is a team-adjusted metric, an opponent-adjusted metric. The only like clearly awful defense on their schedule was the Rutgers defense, and they probably should have beaten Rutgers and literally fumbled that game away.
No.
So,
all right. Let's close it out with Stanford, Dan, and then I guess if you have any other stray thoughts on other coaches,
yeah, we can go through
can
some
hit
others
those.
quickly, but yeah, there was a lot of really good jobs done by coaches in the group of 6 ranks.
Stanford is different because Stanford had an interim coach in Frank Reich.
Yeah.
Last season. Stanford finished the year going 4-8, 3-5 in conference. They beat Boston College. They beat San Jose State. They beat Florida State, and they beat Cal.
I mean, you knew it was going to be kind of rough. You finished the season beating Cal by 3 touchdowns and having their coach get fired.
Yeah.
And you knew that Frank Reich was going to be gone regardless.
That's right.
That there was kind of an element of Stanford playing solidly. They played with their hair on fire at times. They were competing, right? They lost North Carolina by 5, and that was an extremely winnable game for them.
Yep. It was.
I don't know. I guess we have to evaluate this in terms of, like, does Tavita Pritchard have the capability at Stanford with how they're eventually going to look to be a problem for the ACC? Maybe. Sure.
I mean, we can't grade this out the same way. We can't do that. But this will be an interesting test now to see Andrew Luck as basically the GM.
He is the GM. Yeah.
He is the GM. But more than that, he's sort of a figurehead at Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
To see what his chops are like. The hiring of Tavita Pritchard was very well received by the Stanford community. I saw something that season ticket interest was supposedly up. So it'll be a really interesting test this year, the combination of Andrew Luck and his knowledge of the institution with Tavita Pritchard and his energy. I believe they've also invested in facilities, which has created some more optimism. So they just need to figure out some way to become competitive in this landscape. It's been 6 straight years now of 4 wins or fewer, and I feel like any kind of upward trajectory would feel pretty significant. But what that looks like in 2026, there is going to be a time for us to do previews. I've been looking at the roster here just in kind of the build-up to this episode. Dylan Rizek, is he going to be your starter, the transfer from UCF? There are a bunch of Charlie Myrer, like who had 3 snaps or 3 passing attempts last year. You know, who's going to be your starter at quarterback? Davis Warren comes over from Michigan as well.
Yep.
Like they have some names that I guess we've heard about throughout the course of the last couple years that are going to be as part of this roster. But it's really just a big old TBD. I don't think we can actually grade out Tavita Pritchard at this point because it was Frank Reich in interim basis last year.
Look, the path for Stanford to be a problem for the ACC is pretty easy, right? They have basically limitless financial faucets that they could open. There's a ton of money behind the scenes.
If people care about Stanford
So what
football.
I'm saying is this season is the sort of like get people excited season for next year. I think largely it's going to come from high school recruiting. Largely you're going to have to pay players really well, which I don't know if Stanford is super keen on in this moment, and create an environment in which players want to stay at Stanford because they want a Stanford degree, because they like being in Northern California, because they like living there and being in that program, and they don't mind playing in North Carolina every other week or something. So, or the East Coast every other week.
Yeah.
It's a high bar to clear, but if anybody's positioned to be that kind of island, it may be Stanford, just because of their starting point as a university.
Also, it should be mentioned, there are a lot of guys on this team that were on previous versions of the team.
Right.
though they took on some transfers because they had to. I'm looking just like right now at the defensive line. These are guys who have been in this program now for a couple of years running. So there is some familiarity. It probably will be a lighter lift for Tavita Pritchard to get these guys to play together as a team just because there's some built-in awareness of who everybody is. They're not relearning the names come September. That, I think, stands for something. But beyond that, I think we got to go incomplete here. What Frank Reich did on an interim basis was fine, but I think bigger picture, where is Stanford at? Probably still closer to being a problem for Stanford, but TBD. We just don't know.
Okay. To run through other hires quickly, the class of 2025, in terms of new coach hires, Jerry Mack, A+.
Oh, hell yeah.
Whatever. Going to be an absolute problem moving forward for Kennesaw State and the Owls.
Yep.
Jason Eck, going to be a problem moving forward. Absolutely. Yes?
100%. Whether it's at New Mexico or somewhere else,
yes,
will be a problem.
I thought some of the Mac hires were good, like Matt Drinkall.
Yep.
At Central, really good. Charles Kelly at Jacksonville State, really good. Like, who stood out to you, by the way? Who else stood out to you?
Dan Mullen.
Okay.
At UNLV.
Gonna be a problem. Yes.
Blake Harrell.
Yeah.
At East Carolina had a really good season under the radar. For a bit there, we were talking about ECU potentially as a team that could play a part in that American Conference championship game. So,
yep.
I don't know if they're going to get that infusion of Mr. Beast money that we wrote about in the newsletter on Tuesday. Seems like that could be a thing, but I like what happened at ECU.
I love Mark Carney at Kent State. They were 1-23 the 2 years leading up. Had a short amount of time to prepare as like interim full-time. They win 5 games at Kent State. Not super easy.
I would give Matt Entz pretty high marks at Fresno.
I would too.
Because there was a ton of roster turnover, and it's not set in stone.
And that was a late in the process thing as well.
It was. It was, with Jeff Tedford walking away. But I would give Matt Entz pretty high marks there. Bronco Mendenhall did okay.
Absolute problem for the Pac-12 at Utah State.
For the Pac-12. I thought he did all right.
Charles Huff, who's already on the move, so I guess Charles Huff might be a problem at Memphis. Is that where he ended up? Yeah.
He ended up at Memphis, but the story with Charles Huff was upon leaving Marshall and taking most of his team with him to Southern Miss, he was able to turn out, a 6-6 season?
Yeah, at a place that's been struggling.
A place that's really been struggling. So it sucks for Southern Miss that he's leaving after 1 year, but I think he's proven that, at least given current circumstances, he knows how to assemble a roster quickly.
Yeah, we have another one of those in Jimmy Rogers at Wazoo, who's now moving to Iowa State, but I thought he did a terrific job in his first and only year at Wazoo. I thought Casey Keeler did a great job at Temple, given where that program was. And
wanted Trinidad Chambliss. Remember that.
Wanted Trinidad
Chambliss before Ole Miss came calling.
And he also was like an hour, not even an hour, a minute from beating both Army and Navy and ending up in a bowl game in year one. And so, I don't know. I thought he acquitted himself pretty well there. There were some like less than stellar jobs that, we talked about Barry Odom and Rich Rod. Tim Albin had a real rough first year at Charlotte, but that also may just be a place that nobody can win ever. Like they just might not have the support ever. I thought Dole Loggins at App State did not have a good year. That's a place that basically a lot of people win, and he was sort of unable to find that as well. Phil Longo had a tough time at Sam Houston. I don't know. Did anybody else stand out to you? Trey Lamb, I didn't love the job at Tulsa. Zach Kitley, I'm willing to believe he'll be okay at FAU.
Yeah. Eddie George at Bowling Green
started nicely.
Started okay. 4-8. I'll give that one another year. We'll see how that goes. One name you didn't mention, who I think is getting some attention as potentially a coach at a bigger place, is Willie Simmons from FIU.
Oh, he did so well. He did a great job.
5-7, so it's not a record that jumps off the page at you in Conference USA, but a really solid coach who I think knows what he's doing.
Buddy, they went 7-5.
7-5, excuse me. What did I say?
Yeah, they lost their bowl game and ended up 7-6, but yeah.
My apologies. Yeah, that's what I meant.
FIU went nothing but 4-8 under Mike McIntyre, 0-5 and 1-11 Butch Davis's final 2 seasons. He had a couple good years in there. Ron Turner did nothing at FIU. It's a tough place, and he immediately came in and did well.
Absolutely. The only other one that I would throw out here, just because I think I talked a lot about this when we did our preview.
Yeah.
But the situation at Marshall.
Mm-hmm.
That Marshall job to me was really fascinating in the run-up to the season because, in effect, they were bringing in Tony Gibson and a bunch of guys that were familiar with the state of West Virginia.
Yep.
So I was hopeful. Now, they went 4-8. We'll give it another go this year before we, I think, draw any hard and fast conclusions. But I was kind of hoping for a little bit more. Like, there was optimism. I think there were reasons that, it wouldn't go anywhere. But that one to me was another one that
they dropped 2 winnable games to finish out the year. They won 4 out of 5 and then lost 4 out of 5.
They did.
And so it was a streaky year, but offensively, I think they were in a decent place. They were able to throw the ball a little bit. I think they'll be all right.
Yeah. All right. Solidverbal@gmail.com as always, where you can write in if you have any thoughts, or go to the website, fill out the form if you have anything. I do have it working now. It was broken for a while.
Fair.
I just noticed. Broken for a while, but we fixed it. We're good now. Send in your thoughts. You can, of course, reach out on any of the social platforms. We read all the messages, even if we don't reply, Dan. Please hit follow. Please hit subscribe if you made it this far. Help support the team.
Agree.
That's all I got.
That's all I have, Ty. I'm just trying to live my best life here.
For that guy over there, my good friend, Dan Rubenstein. For myself, Ty Hildebrand over here in Eastern Pennsylvania. Stay warm. As always, you know the drill. Stay solid.
Peace.